It is the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every episode, we talk to the experts and get the lowdown on the ever-changing digital marketing landscape. And this one is no different. Episode number 42. Come on, man. Jackie Robinson. I mean, why am I have to look at these papers? This is an easy 42. Didn't every MLB player wear 42? And they do that once a year, I think, right? So Jackie Robinson, I mean, come on, this guy's one of the best humans in history, let alone sports. So the Jackie Robinson episode, we are going to be speaking with Emad Kazi. He's a Global Lifecycle Manager at Stubhub. Had some stops at Apple with Beats by Dre, worked at Lyft for a while, and is in that whole eBay family as well. So really excited to talk to him. We haven't really talked to anybody that specializes in the life cycle journey or the life management of the customer journey, if you will. And I think we do a lot on social. We do a lot on entertainment and linear and OTT. But I'm really excited to get into the granular aspects of how he retargets and how he develops and maintains that customer journey, not only through social, but SEO, email, push notifications, SMS, the whole deal. I'm really excited to get into. I think he's going to drop a lot of knowledge for you. Here we go. The Global Lifecycle Manager at Stubhub, Emad Kazi. All right, team. He is the Global Lifecycle Manager at Stubhub. Emad Kazi joins me on the Business of Social. Emad, thanks so much for the time, man.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so I always kick things off with a random question. You've worked at Apple, including on the Beats by Dre team. If you could recommend one Apple product that's not the iPhone that you have to have, what would it be and why?
Wow, that's a good question. So personally, I can tell you what it isn't.
Okay.
For myself, it's definitely not the Apple Watch for me.
I'm a huge fan. I just got one. That's sacrilegious you said that. All
yeah,
right.
I'm sorry.
Let me hear why is that?
So the reason is I really look at the Apple Watch for myself, again, because every customer is different. Every customer has a different set of needs. I really look at it as a means to track health and fitness more than anything, right? And then I feel like it has so much of an offering that that particular value prop of it is so buried in the experience. Whereas with a Fitbit, like, they've built their entire ecosystem around that one customer need and that one pain point that I'm looking to solve. So it feels like the better fit for me as a product, and it helps that it's probably like a third of the price.
For me, honestly, the value is not having to pull my phone out of my pocket, just being able to look at a text message. I mean, that literally, you said it that way. I feel like the ability to quickly look and see if there's anything I need to respond to right away is better than the health part of it. But what is it? Is there anything that anything on the Apple product line that you think is something that you really enjoy using day to day?
I think it's really the headphones, the Beats headphones in particular, because they've done a good job integrating the technology between their devices to make them pair much more successfully and much more fluidly. So oftentimes it's now a matter of just pulling out my Beats headphones and all of a sudden the pairing happens pretty instantaneously. That I think has been particularly useful. They just launched the Power Beats Pro 2s.
The wireless.
Yeah.
That's a really cool campaign they did too.
Right. And I think those are really special because my issue with the AirPods is I don't know if my earlobes are too big, but they tend to fall out quite a bit.
Yep.
So those are great because they wrap around the ear, they stay secure, but like you still also get to make good on the actual offering of it being easy to carry, portable, and just not having to deal with wires, which is great.
I mean, wireless headphones changed the game for workouts for sure. All right, so let's get into you and Stubhub. Can you give the listeners a quick 60-second elevator pitch on what you do at Stubhub?
Yeah, so a lot of my job right now is focused around understanding amongst existing customers from the time they join Stubhub, make a first purchase, all the way to the time that they sort of realize or max out their lifetime value, how you kind of nurture them and turn them into high value customers, right? So I know typically, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I know you typically focus a lot on digital acquisition, paid social, things of that nature. Think about this as more of a focus on own channels, right? So things like email, push notifications, SMS. Oftentimes they're not necessarily investing ad dollars, but still trying to almost return an always positive ROAS because your marketing efforts are already quote unquote paid for.
I love that. Very cool. So I want to really dig into that because I think the reason I wanted to talk with you specifically is, to your point, a lot of the guests on the show, more social, more over-the-top marketing, but getting into the granular aspects of the email, the push. Because I think there's not a lot of people that put enough credence on your own platforms. Like Facebook and Instagram can always change their algorithm, but you always own your customer's email. What are you going to do with that email, and how can you use it to provide value to the consumer, but also for your return on investment as well? So what are those things that come to mind for you that you just think all marketers and all people that are in that global life cycle type of situation should be looking at?
So I think the way I kind of think about it is it's really important to be driven by this idea of delivering marketing sort of almost agnostic of channel, right? The way I think about it for myself is I'm very driven by this idea of delivering marketing that I've come to define as tutor, right?
Okay.
So this is a framework I came up with earlier this year that I often use to guide my own work, and also helps serve as a sniff test of sorts to help ensure that I'm thinking about the right things when it comes to a marketing job, right? So tutor stands for contextual, useful, timely, engaging, and relevant, right? And like I'll go quickly into each of those.
Yep.
So contextual, you can
I love this, by the way. Good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So it should make sense to your customer why they're seeing the marketing content that they are, be it an ad, email, push notification, etc. And there's enough value add content to provide that meaningful context, right? So although I feel it's true for marketing as a whole, thinking about own marketing channels like email or push, getting this right is crucial.
Yeah.
Right? So like,
because I guess the risk of feeling like spam is so close. That line you really have to tread.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know this running a digital agency, right? But like if you walk that line and you're a little too aggressive with it, you can trigger spam traps. And all of a sudden that email or that customer you built up years nurturing and developing and boosting up their value, all of a sudden they're not marketable, right? And you can't email them. So it's really important to get that right. Useful, I feel like it's really not sufficient for marketing to simply drive value for the business, right? Like it has to drive value for the user as well and the customer as well. And I think otherwise it can potentially run the risk of being a little gimmicky, right? And that could be inherent value in the context of how to use the product itself, offering information on market dynamics, like for example, like a change in price. And I spent some time at Lyft prior to being a boomerang at Stubhub now. And I think this really came to life for me a lot when I was focused on the driver marketing side, where oftentimes when we're sending emails and campaigns, they're really geared around what are the best times to drive in the city? How do you really unlock a driver's potential and teach them how to leverage the platform the most effective way for them to be able to maximize their time? Yeah,
because you're not just marketing to the Lyft user and consumer. You're also marketing to the actual drivers and making sure they have a great experience, and you can have more people out there driving Lyft.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And the same holds true for StubHub as well, because you have the buyer-seller dynamic, and then like for really any marketplace that exists. Kind of going down the list, timely, right? This is something that's kind of related to that context piece, but it's important to show up at the right time for users. The rudimentary example here is that if I have a site-wide sale, right, and I blast an email out to everybody 2 days after the sale's over, then it's obviously a bad look.
It's a problem, yeah.
Yeah, but then I think there's another layer to this that is more cultural, in that like it's kind of important to tap into that cultural zeitgeist, right? So long as it's done in a way that doesn't feel forced. A great example of this is like think Kaepernick and Nike in the last year.
Yep.
Right. So like there's this timely component of it that's very tactical to the campaign effort, but there's also this dimension to it that's broader around how does my brand fit into the timeliness of the moment and of the cultural zeitgeist, which I mean Nike's kind of written the playbook on it, right? Yep. So you can find tons of case studies with them. Engaging, and this is more of like around in addition to everything else, it's obviously important for the campaigns themselves to be performant, right? And they need to be mindful of what best practices are for a particular channel. So how do you optimize for open rates in email? How do you optimize for click-throughs in paid social? And thinking about sort of, whether that's video on social. I heard on your last podcast, testing portrait versus landscape, right? Following best practices to just ensure that things are up to snuff is a very critical component of this, right? It's not just all abstract. Like there needs to be some material tactical guidance here. And I think relevant, last but not least, is just the idea that does it make sense for this user receiving it? Is it personalized enough to an extent where the user feels like, yes, this is me, right? And like Nordstrom and Amazon tend to do this pretty well with their like recommendations in the emails that you get from them, or like users like you also bought this item or viewed this item, right? And I think that's the sort of missing ingredient that makes for really powerful marketing moments.
That's awesome, man. I really like you broke that down. I want to talk about useful for a second because it's something that I talk about all the time. Maybe my listeners are getting sick of me beating this drum, but the useful part of the cuter acronym that you just broke down, making content and making sure it's useful to the consumer and the customer, not for the company, which I think is super important. But can you elaborate a little bit on that, of why you feel that way and why it's important to kind of have that type of credence?
Yeah, totally. So, and I think I'll take a step back and say, like, I've gone through myself a bit of a reformation about how I think about original content, right? From my vantage point, having been someone who's exclusively or more specifically focused around CRM and emails and push notifications, like, there's the obvious surface level tactical value that comes with content, right? Like, it's good for SEO, it's great for maintaining a social presence, but ultimately it's an extension of your brand.
Yes.
Right? And it comes down to, what do you want your brand to be known for? Like, what is your brand identity? And if you just want to be known as, a brand just like any other, a run of the mill brand that has effective marketing that can get people to get through your funnel, like, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think what really piques that is the ability to also be known as a brand who drives value for the customer themselves, and it's known, right? And there's different ways to do this, right? Like, you think about Apple's product marketing campaigns, right? We were just talking about them. When they put an iPhone ad in front of you and they lean into their value props around things like safety or battery life, they really, through the visuals, bring to life exactly how that's meaningfully beneficial for you and or how to use the thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Another example of that is at Lyft specifically. A lot of times we have to almost show the customer how to use the platform through the marketing itself, and you do that through animations, video,
just
things
educate
of that
the
nature.
audience, right?
That's right. And I think that's really where it comes from.
From a brand standpoint, how would you describe what Stubhub is all about? Because there's competitors, you have the Live Nations, Ticketmasters. There's a lot of ticket reselling companies that really are able to help people find tickets to their favorite events and entertainment events. But why is Stubhub different, and how do you guys differentiate yourself against your competitors?
Right. Before diving into this, I want to just drop the disclaimer that I'm speaking as an individual.
Yeah, exactly.
Just so I don't run into any sort of traps on my end. But I think to answer that from my personal point of view, I think we're different in that we as a brand focus on bringing the joy of live experiences, right? Like, we're a company that's not necessarily just about the ticket. It's not about moving tickets.
So you're unlocking the joy of the live experience.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And I think we're in a great place to be able to do that relative to a lot of other competitors that have risen, because we've been in this game for 20 plus years now, right? And in that time, you build up a large database that you can analyze and understand deeply about customers' needs, wants, pain points, what exactly they consider value versus what they don't, and build experiences around those things. So I think that sets us up really well.
That's awesome.
I think in terms of ways that we differentiate, right? And this is going to be one of the case studies that I felt like would have been helpful to mention. Like, when you look specifically through like email campaigns you might get from like a Stubhub versus any other competitor, I think oftentimes they all kind of blend and look the same.
Yeah.
They're all a bunch of events you might be interested in, right? I think as a marketer, it's really my job to figure out, how do I kind of widen the gulf between us and our competitors from a value standpoint, right? And one of the examples of that is a campaign that I launched a couple of years ago known as the Price Drop, right? So when you think about a live event marketplace, it operates just like any other marketplace. There's buyers, there's sellers. Sellers list their prices.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the opportunity to really differentiate ourselves by driving value for the customer, meeting them at their needs. So amongst customers who like show us interest in an event, one of the campaigns I had launched was retargeting them to say, hey, prices have dropped on this event. If you're interested, come back, right? And that boded really well for us in terms of like incrementality, lift, etc. And I think a lot of that is a testament to identifying a user need. We had to look into sort of, why do people who start through the funnel end up not going in all the way? Like, kind of taking a step back and understanding, okay, well, it's maybe cold feet, price sensitivity, they're part of a larger decision-making process with other folks, what have you. Like, tap into one of those insights and really build a use case around it, right? And I think that's what allowed it for us to be so successful. And to date, I haven't seen another competitor really be able to replicate that, right? Because otherwise, the live event ticketing industry, at least the email aspect of it, is hyper competitive in that we can launch a tweak and optimization change where we change CTA colors in an email or whatever. Right. All of a sudden, the next week, another competitor is doing the same thing.
Right.
right? So like it's really important to solve for key base differentiators in such a hyper competitive industry. And like rideshare is no different, right? Like it's really a duopoly and it at times can feel like a tit for tat.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, and the answer may be no, is there a way to provide value to your customer specifically other than A, unlocking the joy of the experience, B, here's an amazing deal that can potentially put you in a seat of something that you really want to be at, just as you kind of build that community of ticket buyers and live events? How are there other ways that you've tried to provide value that people appreciate?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's one of the things that we're embarking down right now on our roadmap is we feel like our platform offers so much more than just events, right? In itself, like not just buying events, but you could also sell events, right? So like allowing, I mean, the analog I'm going to use, I know you're a basketball fan, is like that of a two-way player, right? So like
Kawhi Leonard.
you can, right. You could buy and sell on the platform, right? It's not just about buying. I think that there's a great value unlocked there. There's these high value behaviors that I think every business has that you can kind of take a step back, try to understand and nurture for to help really realize the value of the platform. And I think in addition to that, we're now kind of going into this phase where we have more partnerships around different sports leagues where we can deliver on these truly unique experiences, whether it's, again, just hypothesizing myself here, but like whether it's like meet and greets or like arena tours, what have you. I think those are things that sort of we're well poised to do.
Has there been any partnerships in your time at Stubhub that have really maybe exceeded expectations or worked really well? Just being able to partner with another brand or another influencer that's like really made a campaign special or go well?
Sure. Well, I think the one that comes to mind was one that I directly worked on a few years ago with the Philadelphia 76ers. At the time, we had been historically and exclusively known as a resale place, right? This was our first foray into doing what is truly like an end-to-end blended marketplace, and we chose the Philadelphia 76ers right on the culmination of completing their process to actually build out the first ever blended marketplace where it actually operates very similar to the stock market, right? Like it doesn't matter whether your ticket's being bought firsthand or secondhand. Everything's flowing through one place.
Yeah.
Everything's authentic and authorized and guaranteed to be a valid ticket. And all of a sudden you're reacting as a consumer to prices that are dictated by the market as opposed to something that, like a pricing analyst might set or that like a seller might charge for, right? It's a culmination of those things and it operates very much like a free market in terms of listing, buying, reselling, and ticket swapping hands.
So that was a direct campaign like 76ers.com/tickets where you're able to, through StubHub, kind of use your engine and get that to fans?
Right. And I think the value was twofold, right? For us, it was that dive into primary ticketing for the first time where we were the only place where you could buy a 76ers ticket, right? Like no other competitor had their listings available to them.
And that was for a season, game, week?
Regular season playoffs. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe that partnership is still in place today.
Awesome. Very cool.
So that's the value for us. I think for them, it was the opportunity to really grow their brand and reach net new target audiences.
Yeah.
Right. Like for us, we have the ability to upsell people who are in Philadelphia that haven't been to a Sixers game.
Yeah, you have a database of this. David went to 42 Phillies games the last 3 years, but has not yet gone to a Sixer game. That's pretty cool.
That's right. In theory, exactly that.
Right. That's awesome. Talk to me about Instagram shopping, man, because I'm sure this is something that your team has been working on, and just the ability to, just the user experience is so much easier now with some of these tweaks that these social networks are making. But have you guys done some test case? Are you guys all in on this? Would love to get, from a brand perspective, your thoughts on Instagram shopping.
Yeah. So to be honest, I can't really offer too much value out there just because I'm a little more removed from like social shopping in general as always. But I think it is something that we'll probably continue to test around and understand what the proper use case is for it. I think ultimately what it's going to come down to, and it's trying to, again, to like ascribe to those marketing principles over any other channel, is I'm sure we'll find the right product market fit for it. It may not serve every need, every use case. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it lends itself more to like that impulse buy use case more than, let's say, one that's
24 hours before a concert type deal or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And I think the opportunity to test different creatives and carousels, what have you, is going to be really powerful there. Right. Again, I'm not the best person to speak to because that's not where my specialty lies, but I'm confident that we'll be able to unlock value against it.
Well, let's dig a little deeper, more granular into your specialty. I really want to kind of geek out over a little bit the life cycle of a customer. It's something that we really haven't touched on that blatantly on this podcast yet, but let's get top level to start. What's your overall, I guess, breakdown of how to approach life cycle marketing and be able to manage your community the right way?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what's really helpful is starting with the data, right? Like kind of go in with a fresh set of eyes and really try to understand your database through various analyses that allow you to show basically tenure and seasonality of a customer, right? And then really mapping out all the differences within your customer base, right? So it's really like a three-pillar approach. Like, A, like, where are my customers in their life cycle? Like, are they new? Are they well retained? Are there folks that have churned, right? Are there folks that like haven't bought from us in the last year or two that like we might be interested in reactivating? And then double clicking windows, right? Like amongst my active buying population, who are my top buyers?
Yeah.
Who are the ones that kind of show that they're a little fickle, right? And then pairing that with what you know about them, right? Like, do they have a propensity to buy in one category over another? Like in the context of ticketing, are they exclusively an NBA buyer? Do they exclusively only buy Warriors tickets or Lakers tickets? In the context of like rideshare, right? If they're drivers, do they only drive on weekends? Do they only drive on weekdays? And then last but not least, pairing that with an action of some sort that you want them to take. And it kind of goes back to those high value behaviors I mentioned earlier. But like there are certain things that you might want a user to do on your platform that once you get them to take that action, they'll stick because it drives value for them, right? So like an example of that for Stubhub would be we have a feature called Price Alert, right? Where we essentially allow you to go to an event page, set a price of your choice, and then we'll notify you when a ticket hits that price.
That's awesome.
Right? And then at that point, like you've expressed the interest that like, yes, I will buy at price X, right? And we're just making it easier for you to discover that ticket at that price and then go and complete the purchase whenever it falls to the price of your liking. So it's really the combination of those three things that then lend themselves well to understanding who your customer is, where they are in their relationship with your brand, as well as what are the actions that you need them to take and how do you respond to actions they might have taken to be able to create the most powerful marketing experience such that they stick around for longer.
At Stubhub or at any of your previous stops, is there something that comes to mind when I say, has there ever been a piece of data you've looked at or you've analyzed something and it's blew your mind, just like, I can't believe that's the case, or kind of like reshifted your entire strategy based on, oh my God, 85% of Lyft drivers actually only drive on the weekends, or whatever that thing is? Is something come to mind when I use that?
One of the things that I recently uncovered was that people really double down on what they like, right? And that's what really unlocks the value. And that got me thinking, like, initially it was a little counterintuitive, but really that makes sense. Like, I think oftentimes a lot of companies get caught up in trying to nurture behaviors where a customer isn't showing propensity to do a certain thing or take a certain action or buy a certain thing.
Rather than tripling down on what they are doing, yeah.
Right. Like an example, like if you were to take Best Buy as an example, right? Like we see that you buy cables from us a lot. How about we try to sell you on this fridge, right? Like let's try to broaden how we approach our relationship with you. And like, that's not to say that that's a bad strategy, but I think oftentimes that segue of broadening the relationship with the customer might be a little bit more organic and natural if you start doubling down on, well, we notice you buy cables on the occasions where they break. What if we could sell you cables that'll ease your life when you move into a larger house? Let's say if we can capture signal on that, we can sell you longer cables.
Yeah.
Right? And like really like building out a specialty and a niche for a customer and then using that as your sort of launch pad to broaden into other use cases, I think is much more powerful than just selling anything and everything to them and hoping it all sticks.
Yeah, that's really smart. To that, I've asked this question quite a bit on the show, but has there ever been, from a marketing standpoint or campaign, an A/B test that you did that, again, surprised you about the results or kind of led you to a new belief going forward on that?
Yeah, I can give an example, and it's not mine directly, but it's one that I was kind of a close observer of. It was at Lyft where we launched an experiment where we essentially just tried to make the product available to fit more of the customer's use cases, right? So when you think about a new customer, we could talk to them about sort of what they were doing in that moment. So like, let's say I came in on Halloween, I gave a ride and you never heard, or I took a ride and you never heard from me ever again.
Yep.
right? Like there were opportunities for us to target you beyond just Halloween, right?
Yep.
There's a holiday almost every month. There's holidays. There's a Friday night every week
Yep.
whenever you want to go out, and like we can almost showcase to users like, hey, like you can do what you did on Halloween more than one time a year,
Huh.
right? Like Lyft is good for that,
Yep.
right? And it's very bare bones fundamental marketing, but we ran it as an A/B test, and like we were surprised to show the incremental lift we saw that we got without actually putting like a coupon to it,
Right.
right? And I think that was a really powerful
Just a
learning moment.
reminder or a nudge or just like, hey, by the way, we're still around type deal.
Right, exactly. And I think it was a real watershed moment for me because I think historically a lot of these high growth unicorn companies, not just rideshare, really coupon their way into growth. And like that's why you end up hearing about all these companies that go IPO, but they're not really profitable. That's a huge chunk of it is they invest a lot of dollars in couponing, and to be able to get the same return without having to discount your product is huge.
That's awesome.
Right? So I think that was one example that was really telling for me.
To manage your customer, is there a common mistake you see other brands making that you try to make sure you don't do at Stubhub?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to come back to it, I think it's really putting channel specific tactics over the user journey, right? And it's something that we're all guilty of. It's realization I've had like probably in the last year or so that's probably not the right way to go down. And I think what oftentimes ends up happening is organizations are kind of vertically siloed within whatever their specialties are, right? So like you have the SEM pod, you have the email pod, the on-site marketing pod, social, and then what they're all working hard to kind of like pump out campaigns and experiments that are going to be good for the user, but the realization that they're all hitting the same user isn't really evident, right? So I think what we all have the opportunity to do as marketers is kind of take a step back and figure out holistically how are all my channels working in harmony with one another, such that I'm not wasting my Facebook dollars on someone who I can easily get to perform the same action through email without putting any ROI money next to it.
For you guys, where have you seen the most ROI, from email marketing to push notifications to people just stumbling across the website and continuing to be a returning customer? How does that kind of break down for you, and how do you choose where to spend your money or use your time?
Yeah, so for us, our focus is largely things that don't necessarily need a quote unquote like acquisition budget, right? Like beyond like occasional like couponing or whatever. But beyond that, I think where I've really seen growth pop is really around push, right? I mean, and again, it's about marrying the right use cases. That trend could easily be sort of like counter what it is today if we didn't have the right use cases for the right
and
channel.
That's through the app or through text or both?
Through app.
Okay.
For us right now. But it's one of those things where if we tried to push very top of funnel things to you on a channel that's very intimate,
spam.
It's not a great fit. And like we've tested some of that before and it just doesn't
so
really
the
show
algorithm
very
based
engagement.
on, again, using the Warriors example, you've bought 7 Warrior tickets in the last 12 months. You're only going to push to them if there's something on Warriors or something that is, a concert that's playing at Warrior Stadium, things like that.
Yeah, that would be a great example of understanding who the user is, as opposed to taking use cases where like, hey, it's a great day to go out in San Francisco or San Diego. Here's everything that's happening in their area. Like really drilling down into what they know, what you know about them, as well as sort of what they know they want.
That's, I guess, how do you manage all that? Because I mean, just looking at, let's use LA for an example. You have the Dodgers, the Angels, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Ducks, etc. I could go on forever. But if, let's say, you have segments that have only bought tickets only to those sports teams individually, you almost have to have a campaign just for the Dodger people, just for the Laker people. And maybe I'm not thinking about it in a tech standpoint, but I mean, at any given time, I'm sure Stubhub can be running thousands upon thousands direct if not more than that.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of data associated with each of those events, right? And each of those events kind of have their own respective audiences, and there can be overlap if someone does like the Warriors, the Giants, and the A's, and the Niners, right? Like at that point, like you do have to understand sort of what is most relevant. How do you sort of synthesize all this into an experience where you're showcasing everything that they like? And is that the right approach versus is it the right approach to just double down on what we know they have the highest propensity for? And this is where like leaning into the tech aspect a little bit, like there's opportunity to leverage things like personalization algorithms and
Yeah.
really identifying, okay, for a given event, like who's the right population for this relative to any other event.
That's awesome. Can you also, from a data perspective, see the type of the demo that went to a Chris Rock concert, and then based on, I guess, from a data standpoint, can you then retarget people that are most likely to want to see that same type of event based on historic events as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that's one of like the luxuries of being a company that's been in this industry for like a couple of decades now, right? Is like we have these profiles built out where like we can serve customers what they like to see and what they want to see.
So getting
And
super granular, if you found out at a Chris Rock concert there was 20,000 people there, for some odd reason, 7,000 of the people actually drove up from San Diego, you could almost get that, targeted, where the next Chris Rock concert in LA, you can target your San Diego base knowing that there was some weird reason why people chose to drove up type deal, right?
yeah, and I mean, we'll do that around certain like tentpole moments, right? Where like we know there's an audience that will travel, right? So you think about markets like Fresno in California, right? Where
Yeah.
like not much popping in Fresno, but like they might have a propensity to travel to either LA or San Francisco based on what's happening around them.
Quick flight.
And like
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah.
So those are the types of use cases we do look at.
What else are we missing in the life cycle management space? I mean, you talk about someone just figuring out about your product all the way to someone timing out of your product. I guess I would like to dig into that a little bit. How do you know when somebody has officially turned you off or is no longer interested?
So I think there's a couple different dimensions to it, right? I think there's going to be moments where you just don't have the product market fit for that user for that time period, right? Like I think driving for rideshare is a great example of that, where it's largely seen as a job, right? Like people do it for compensation and earnings opportunities. If you go from being laid off to then driving for Lyft or Uber or who have you, or doing DoorDash for a prolonged period of time to make ends meet,
Yep.
all of a sudden, once you get that job or once you kind of get back on your feet,
You don't need it anymore. Yeah.
you don't necessarily need it. Maybe it's still ancillary and beneficial,
Right.
but at that point, like we need to sort of capture signal to understand that that pivotal moment has happened in your life, and we're not gonna
It's a classic. Take a hint, dude. It's over.
right. And like at that point, we can not be tone deaf and
Right.
actually recognize that and approach the marketing tactic for that particular user in a way that's sensible for them, that fits within their life, right? Because ultimately that's the goal. It's not to meet a particular threshold around any particular business metric week over week. It's really help find a consistent place for any particular brand in that user's life, right?
Yeah.
And if that goes from being, multiple times a day to all of a sudden being, once a quarter, that's fine. But so long as we're maximizing that share of time and share of mental availability, I think that's the job to be done when it comes to lifecycle marketing.
Is a customer ever truly dead? I mean, what you like you said, you mentioned that point. Somebody gets a full-time gig after using Lyft for a while. When is then the proper cadence? If is it once a quarter, once a year? Like, do they ever fully drop off the remarketing cycle?
Right. That's a good question. I think it depends on who the customer is,
Okay.
right? Like, and again, it kind of depends on what the use case is. And there's ways to capture signals very tactically as part of like a life cycle
What are some of those
campaign.
signals? Like just not opening emails at all? Like,
That's definitely one of
yeah.
them. And another thing that like I've seen become more popular over the past couple of years is like micro polling within the body of the email, right? So like, and you might have seen this where if you might get an email from Uber or Lyft saying, "Hey, we noticed you haven't taken a ride with us for 90 days. Like, do any of the following apply to you?" And
Interesting.
it'll give you like a multiple choice pick where you can say, like, "Oh, I bought a car.
Yeah.
I moved, whatever the case is." And like all of a sudden, like we store that as an attribute to say, okay, like maybe it's not right, and maybe this customer is like dormant for now, right? And then like if and when the time comes, like we want to be ready and available to greet them back as a brand.
I guess that's what my point is. How have you found in your career thus far great ways to remarket or to touch those people that are maybe not interested for a period of time?
Totally, that's a good question. I think the straightforward way is typically what you see a lot of brands see is promo or coupon someone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, come back today after 90 days. We really miss you, Dave.
Right.
Come back and we'll give you 15% off of X, Y, and Z. Right? I think the challenge for me is really finding ways to do that without having to resort to couponing.
Right.
And I'm of the belief that that can be done so long as like we're always optimizing for what is the right fit for that customer. Right? And like, I don't have the clear cut answer to that today from a tactical standpoint, but I think that's the investment to be made to really unlock whatever that might be.
How often throughout your career and at Stubhub, how big is the leaving tickets in your cart remarketing? I mean, that must be a huge part of what you guys do. And what have you seen? You don't have to give me like detailed numbers, but how big of a silo is that? And what have you seen successful to re-engage people after they haven't finished the whole process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a pretty sizable part of like the business we drive as like a customer engagement team, right? And I think a lot of that is because like there is intent and there's affinity, right? We define affinity as like, hey, you may not have necessarily shown intent or interest in a particular event, but based on your past behavior, based on other people who are like you might be interested in this. Or based on just you having to live in San Francisco, you might be interested in this. Interest is more you've given a signal, whether that's abandoning a checkout, abandoning the product page or the event page, that, hey, like there's some degree of interest here. It's on us to like really dive into like, and this is when we work with our market research team to understand like, hey, amongst people who are like abandoning cart, like, can we get some like read on like why they're doing that? Like what is the barrier for them that they're seeing that's like preventing them from getting over the hump? Right. And like in our case, oftentimes it's price. Like obviously sellers set prices and those prices may not jive well with what a buyer's expecting to pay, but they still really want to go. Right. So like that's where we're kind of trying tactics, and that price drop campaign I mentioned to you earlier is a great example of that, where we identify the user need, they're price sensitive. Maybe they're not ready to buy at that price point, but maybe we can sell them on the idea that when prices drop, we'll let you know, you can come back and buy, or we can guide you to set a price alert so that you define exactly what price you want. And then once it's available, we come back and get you by.
I want to ask you what's one thing you wish that was more prevalent or that was possible, like when it comes to online purchasing. Because I know for me, when I leave something in my cart, it's often because I'm pretty interested, but then I have to fill out 13 boxes of information. I gotta go find my wallet and pull my credit card out. And I think Amazon has figured that out, right, with like the one-click buying and things like that. But where do you think we're going, and where do you want it to get to make sure that people aren't, not buying something because of the legwork or the laziness factor of getting up and filling out 14 fields of information?
Sure. That's a great point. I expect a lot of where Amazon has kind of set the tone to become more and more ubiquitous over time. And I think you're seeing those same problems being solved from different vantage points with things like Apple Pay, Google Pay.
Yeah, I'm sure Apple Pay's helped a lot with your industry because you're able to save that credit card on your iMac or phone and it just kind of auto populates for sure.
That's right. And like you're seeing so many different sort of merchants or technology companies offer those things, right? Like Visa has Visa Checkout now. PayPal's been around. So I think that's something I expect to see get more ubiquitous. I think in addition to that, it's also this notion of understanding sort of like, what is the holdup, right? If price is truly the barrier, like, is financing an option? I don't just mean this in ticketing, right?
Yeah.
But like, there's often times where you have big ticket items that in aggregate might be a very scary price point, but then now you have merchants or sort of technology platforms like Affirm that offer financing on things like a GoPro camera or live event tickets, and like to have that more readily available.
It goes back to the old school layaway, back in the day. Yeah.
Exactly. Like putting down a deposit and then paying it off over the next 6 months. I think it's a lot easier to sell someone on going to a Super Bowl if you can sell them on data that all you have to do is pay $20 down today, or buying a new TV is all you have to do is pay $20 down today.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you've seen it with smartphones and cell carriers, right? Like they've really mastered that game.
And that's changed like the last 2 to 3 years. I've noticed it. It used to be pay for the phone now, but now it's all built into that monthly plan over 2 years. Yeah.
Exactly. And you almost don't even notice it, right?
That's
like
true.
Between my wife and my parents, like I've got a few smartphones on my monthly bill, and it's like I'm just simultaneously paying for a few iPhones at a time. And like I think it's, again, the benefit of it is it really taps into that user need. It doesn't feel malicious in that there's some sort of like interest
Yeah.
on top of it, but it really meets that user need and it allows them to unlock whatever value they're seeking to unlock from your brand while still getting the
Yeah, and
compensation
I
in
think
return for it.
I've never done it at your level, but even working with a client recently, like we were taking people off social to a microsite, and there was like 5 steps to confirmation. I'm just like, you can't ask. For me too, for people going from social, you just can't ask people to complete 5 steps. It's just way too much. So how can we get this down to 3 or 2 or 1, hopefully? Because I think so much money is lost, and so much success is really not met based on just that simple factor, like the barrier of entry for an interested customer that has raised their hand and said, I'm interested, but now you're going to make me do all this work, so I'm going to bail out type deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I want to get you some rapid fire questions to close us out. Listen, you do a lot of analyzing, a lot of data through everything you do at Stubhub. Is there one tool that you use that you just could not live without?
That's a great question. And it's going to be a very archaic answer, but today it's probably Excel.
Yeah. Google
Um,
Sheets, maybe?
yeah, Google Sheets, the more modern version
Yeah,
of it. But I think without those two things, like
that's true.
not having the data available to interpret as I need to would be a huge
By the way,
challenge
I
in
feel
this
like I don't
particular
know if
field.
they've done this yet, but at the elementary school and the middle school, high school level, like if Excel is not a required course at this point, I mean, I just feel like
Right.
it's so useful and it can and do so many things, but people still don't have a lot of knowledge on it. So I agree.
Right. And I
Um,
also want to kind of use this as an opportunity to really dispel the notion that marketers might not be data driven, right? Like, especially in today's day and age, like Dave, you probably know this
oh
better
yeah,
than
yeah,
anybody. Like, you run a digital
yeah,
agency,
yeah,
like, we're in the numbers day in and day out looking for the right optimization opportunities, understanding what the true incremental lift is on things. Like, those are all part of the marketing job. It's not just all Photoshop and creative branding out here.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm someone too that just like I hated math in school and everything like that. I just love the creative and the marketing part of it. But now I find myself looking at close rates per day on our clients and open rates and like you said, just constantly looking at data and being able to evolve, adjust, tweak based on that data is really what marketing is. I think in 2019. Um, in our industry, things move so quickly, tech, algorithms, things like that. Is there any literature or any follows on social, anything that you keep a close tabs on to make sure you kind of keep your thumb on the ever-changing landscape?
That's a great question. So I almost, and I think some people might consider it a little counterintuitive, but I think it's really important to try to continue to ascribe to those like tried and true marketing principles,
Hmm.
right? And I think the way I seek those out often is like cliche, but Gary Vee is a great follow,
Yep.
right? Like I think he does a great job of preaching those things
Agreed.
and really evangelizing a lot of those things that I mentioned today. I think in terms of like gleaning out information, I think meetups are great for that.
Yep.
I'm personally a little weary of vendor hosted conferences. But like I think anytime you have the opportunity to like go to a meetup where you have other like-minded folks solving similar problems in their industries, it's a great unlock
Yeah.
because the same principles that they apply can very equally apply to whatever your vertical is. Those are the main places where I think I kind of seek out knowledge and literature, if you will.
I love it. If there's companies out there, businesses, brands that really, and I think it's true, right? I mean, even for my company, the life cycle management really wasn't brought into about 4 years into the company. We really started looking at it like who are our active clients, who are our past clients, who are clients that have renewed, and how do we target these people differently? If a brand is just getting into, let's look at our consumer and let's start to look at the life cycle of our consumer. What are some of those key tenets that you leave them with on this podcast and make sure they're looking at?
So I would first and foremost, and we're going to start from the top,
Yep.
right? Like think about from the time you acquire a customer. Where did you acquire them from,
Yep.
right? Like a customer who comes in through paid search is very different from a customer that comes in through paid social, right? And then from a
Or organically
longevity,
to your website. It's a totally different game. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, or through like some sort of referral program or partnership you have with another company.
Yep.
Like those are all very different types of customer types, and there should be different benchmarks and expectations associated with them,
Yep.
right? But then you can, if you're not clear on what those are today, you can kind of track those across sort of your core business metrics across various time windows, right? So
Mhm.
like, what do they look like at 7 days post acquisition? What do they look at 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? And over time, you could really build out a true profile of what to expect from your acquisition sources. If you know that you're going to pay, let's say $10 for a customer on Facebook, and their lifetime value is going to be 7x over the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Like that's a very different perspective and view than their lifetime value being $10 over the first 30 days. And all of a sudden you kind of call it and just say, okay, well, maybe Facebook wasn't worthwhile.
Yeah. One thing I learned that I'll share to the listeners as well is we were pretty much running campaigns, and producer Will, you know this as well, but we were running campaigns the same way no matter who they were, whether it was a new customer, a current customer, an old customer. And finally we looked at the data, like, what are we doing? Like our return rate on customers is, up there towards the highest in the industry. Why are we not cultivating these relationships more and focusing less on the cold outreach? And it seems like a very simple thing that kind of took an aha moment, but just looking at the data showed us, wait a second, these 19 people are our bread and butter. Why are we marketing them the same way that we're marketing the other 300 or whatever? So it's definitely something I recommend everybody kind of dive into. Any advice for anybody that is looking to get more into a role? I mean, you've obviously had some amazing stops at Apple, and you talked about Lyft and, now Stubhub. Any advice for anybody striving to get into a position where you're at?
Yeah, and it's actually an anecdote I came across earlier. It's like you have to kind of seek out not just where, you're, and I'm going to use this word kind of for lack of a better term, but you don't want to just go where you're tolerated and accepted. You want to go where you're celebrated.
Interesting.
Right. And I think it's really the opportunity to like apply your knowledge to a place that's really ripe and is the right time and place to be able to apply all that stuff you have cooking in your head. Right. Like, I think and it also depends so much on where you are in your career. If you're just starting out, it's really about going to a company where you'll have the opportunity to really impact and influence things. At least that was the way I approached it. And Beats was just that for me. Yeah. I joined Beats when I was in my junior year of college as an intern.
Are you wearing Beats right now?
Of course.
There you go.
These are not skull candies.
I have an Apple Watch. Sorry.
Anyways. Amazing. So I would say seek out those opportunities that are going to kind of be like those rocket ship moments for you, and then really give you the most learning and opportunity to maximize your learnings. But then go to a place where you'll have the opportunity to really leverage those learnings and apply that subject matter expertise.
I like that. I did search tickets in Google, and you guys are the first result here. I'm not going to click the link, though, because I know that might cost you about $7. So I consider you a friend now, but that shows you where you guys are at. Anybody that you can recommend in your network that you think would provide some knowledge or value for the listeners? If so, who would that person be and why?
Yeah, my mind goes back to a recent colleague of mine at Lyft who goes by the name of Alex Shaheen.
Okay.
Right. And he is, I think, one of the most brilliant marketers I've ever met. And I say this because he has such a holistic understanding of the customers that he's serving that although he operates largely in a core product marketing role, he's able to use that to inform product market fit. Right. And I think the value he drives in terms of understanding what the customer's wants and needs are, and then tying that back to a marketing strategy that meets those needs and also elevates the brand. I think it's one of the best I've seen, and I've been fortunate to be around a lot of great marketers at all the stops I've made.
That's awesome. Where he's from? Where is he from?
He's from Lyft.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you so much, man. That was amazing. I really appreciate all the detail and all the knowledge that you dropped. Once again, Emad Kazi, the Global Lifecycle Manager at Stubhub. Thanks so much for the time, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Shout out to producer Will.
Yeah, shout out. Thank you.
Thanks.
There he was, Emad Kazi. How about producer Will it took 42 episodes to get producer Will a shout out. Maybe not. Maybe somebody said thanks to your team or something. But that was definitely the first time someone has said producer Will. Direct shout out. What did you say earlier? A non-David Brickley shout out. That's huge. That's awesome. I'm sure you guys really enjoyed that. That was definitely a super interesting podcast, unlike any of the other 41, because I think he, again, rather than focusing more on the social, we really got more into email and push notification and app and retargeting and really the customer journey, right? Which I think with any brand, it's not the first thing you think of when you first launch a brand, because you're thinking about, keeping the doors open and making sure that you're making revenue and getting customers. But at a certain point at any brand, I know it happened here with STN, as you mature as a company, it's no longer just trying to get new customers and pay the bills. But wait a second, now we have former customers. Now we have active customers. Now we have people that we've talked to but haven't necessarily signed a deal with. So how do we market correctly to those people and, again, provide value and things like that? So I really enjoyed that. How about the CUTER acronym? Do you guys like that? CUTER stands for contextual, useful, timely, engaging, and relevant. He broke that down, and I think actually couldn't agree more with all that knowledge that he dropped on this episode. And that will do it for episode 42. Once again, thanks to Dylan, Will, and Furker for all their help on the podcast, as we always do. This has been another edition of the Business of Social podcast, powered by STN Digital. I am your host, David Brickley.